Greetings, I am Szántai Gábor and this is the third episode of the Hungarian History Podcast. One of my goals is, in this series, to uncover Hungary's often overlooked struggles against the Ottoman Empire, a conflict that profoundly shaped the destiny of Europe. In our last episode, we explored the origins of the Ottoman Turks. Now it is time to ask a new question. How were the Ottoman conquests perceived by others? To answer this, we turn to the insights of Professor Fodor Pál, one of Hungary's foremost Ottoman historians. His reflections offer a powerful lens through which to understand how various European nations have interpreted the Ottoman wars. Right at the beginning, I have to remark that I use the Oriental name order regarding Hungarians where family names come first. So, according to Professor Fodor Pál, the Ottoman occupation was the greatest catastrophe in Hungarian history, deep and enduring trauma that devastated the country economically, politically, ethnically, and psychologically. It laid the groundwork for many of the tragedies that would later unfold in the 20th century. But Hungary wasn't alone in this struggle. There are three different interpretations across regions, from the Balkans to the Mediterranean. They are shaped by each country's own losses, research, traditions, historical sources, and national sensitivities. How a nation remembers the Ottoman era depends on what it endured and how it studies its past and how deeply that past still wounds. So let's now take a closer look at how different countries remember the Ottoman age. From the Turkish perspective, the conquest is often described as a divine mission. Turkish historians usually reject the idea that the Ottomans were imperialists. Instead, they frame the expansion as a religious duty. Their textbooks use the word fetih, which means opening, not invasion, but the spreading of Islam's peace to lands they saw as already divided and broken. And there is some truth to that view. At times, Serbian and even Byzantine rulers invited Ottoman troops or hired them as mercenaries to help in their own civil wars. Later, of course, they paid a high price for this short-term support. There is one key word we should remember here, musamaha, which means institutionalized tolerance. Under Ottoman rule, ordinary people, especially those who had already suffered from constant internal wars, sometimes found better conditions for survival. So what was the Ottoman claim? They said they were liberating Orthodox Christians from Catholic domination, and they were creating a space where their faith could actually survive and even flourish under Islamic rule. This idea still forms part of Turkey's official narrative today, that their ancestors were not conquerors but stabilizers. It is an interesting claim, and it actually similar to how the ancient Romans once described their own empire. The Romans spoke of Pax Romana, or Roman peace, meaning peace through domination. But was Ottoman tolerance really as ideal as they say? It's worth asking. Were things truly that peaceful? Were they really all nice and easy under Ottoman rule? Let's take a closer look at the reality in Ottoman-occupied Buda. Yes, they allowed one single church to remain in the Buda castle. All Christian denominations were permitted to worship there, but only once a week. And as they saw it, The Christians were just idol worshippers anyway. But like in many other towns under Ottoman rule, Hungarian settlers were not allowed to move in. Instead, the invaders filled the cities with Bosnians, recent converts to Islam. The Ottoman Empire ended up occupying about 40% of the Kingdom of Hungary. In some regions, 70 to 90% of the villages were completely wiped out. Monasteries and nunneries weren't just abandoned, they were deliberately destroyed. Why? Because they trained new generations of Christian priests. Eliminating them meant cutting off the future of Christian education. Even the tolling of church bells was often banned, depending on the mood or policy of the local pasha. Instead of bell towers, minarets were built, where the muezzins could praise Allah at designated times. Locals, bitter about the change, mockingly called the muezzins leather bells. But this wasn't true coexistence, it was regulated and restricted tolerance. The Ottomans allowed just enough religious activity to keep the peace while steadily dismantling institutional Christianity. Just imagine the soundscape of a once Christian city. After 500 years of familiar bells ringing through the streets, they suddenly fell silent. In their place rose the unfamiliar tones of Arabic prayers echoing from slender minarets. This so-called tolerance came with harsh realities. Crumbling churches couldn't be repaired, and their decay was policy, not neglect. Non-Muslims faced double taxation through the jizya, a financial burden that kept tightening year by year, sometimes even collected 2 or 3 times annually by the Italian and Jewish tax collectors of the Ottoman landlords. And I haven't even mentioned the Janissary recruitment, the devshirme. This was a tax paid in children. The Ottomans claimed it was an honor, offering these boys a chance at a glorious career. But in Hungary it didn't work. The system collapsed because Hungarian children were often ungrateful. Many killed their new masters at the first chance, cutting their throats. Unlike in the Balkans, the devshirme had to be abandoned in Hungary because the kids were simply too dangerous. When we read about the Ottoman conquest, Turkish history books insist it was a divine mandate, not imperialism. They say, we followed the Gaza, the Holy War, and Jihad, not conquest for power. But the results were identical. A sprawling empire built on subjugation, no matter the pious justifications. They called it fetih, a spiritual opening, and not istila. It is the word for brutal colonization. I hope I could pronounce these terms well. They claimed the lands were in chaos before their arrival, and that the fetih brought order, a peace where different faiths could coexist. In theory, this sounds remarkably progressive, but theory and practice diverged. Peace meant silent church bells and crumbling walls. Coexistence meant second-class status under Islamic law. Order was enforced by the sword, and it was used often. In fact, while the population density in Western Europe was about 100 people per square kilometer in places like Italy and 40 in France, it was just 7 people per square kilometer in Ottoman-occupied Hungary. The Ottomans mastered the art of imperial rebranding centuries before modern public relations and politically correctness. They still believe today that the Ottoman expansion ultimately benefited the world. According to their version, only a few evil infidels resisted from their cursed castles, and this is the official Ottoman narrative. Another key term is istimach, gaining an opponent's trust through diplomacy. This idea suggests the conquest wasn't a disaster, but rather a peaceful, gradual process where the empire offered everyone the chance to join its hierarchy willingly. Thus, the conquest brought musamaha, a religious peace and tolerance. Remember this term, musamaha. The Ottomans argue that it especially benefited Orthodox Christianity, protecting it from Latin Church domination. And in this regard, the claim holds some truth. Now let's look at the Christian Mediterranean view, which was both Greek and Latin. For the Greeks, 1453 was a disaster, the fall of Byzantium, the loss of their classical statues and the end of their ancient culture. But there is an irony here. These same Byzantines had once hired Turkish mercenaries for their own civil wars. Even in defeat, there was a strange victory. The Orthodox Church took control in Constantinople again. What about the Venetians? In the beginning, Venice became wealthy by helping the Ottomans, and that is an inconvenient truth. Imagine if the Byzantines hadn't hired the Turks as mercenaries, or Venice and France hadn't sold them guns, or the Balkan states hadn't provided them heavy cavalry. History might have turned out very differently. The rest of the Christian Mediterranean population remembers the Turks with fear. The Ottomans were a constant threat from the sea. Tens of thousands of Italians, French, and Spanish people fell victim to Ottoman pirates who traded slaves. Let's never forget the centuries of white slavery. Here, we must mention the famous general of Hungarian King Matthias Corvinus. This soldier, Magyar Balázs, was the one who retook the town of Otranto, where the Turks had set up a base in 1480. If he and his 2,100 Black Army soldiers hadn't driven them out in 1481, then Italy might have experienced more of the Musamaha, the Ottoman religious tolerance. Italians still remember the 800 martyrs of Otranto, who were slaughtered because they refused to convert to Islam. Now let's move to the Balkans, where memories are divided. The Serbs, Bulgarians, and Greeks have similar views to the Hungarians and share the martyr-defender narrative. The Serbs believe their nation was sacrificed early on to protect Christianity and later endured over 400 years of oppression before finally being reborn. The Bulgarians and the Romanian principalities, Wallachia and Moldavia, share a similar view. They believe Ottoman rule interrupted their development and pulled them away from the Western European path of civilization. Herzegovina offers three perspectives: Hungarian-like resentment, Venetian pragmatism, and even some pro-Ottoman sentiment. Albanians remain divided between Catholic resentment and Muslim gratitude. Meanwhile, Bosnians have increasingly embraced their Ottoman legacy. Muslim Albanians argue that the Ottoman conquest saved them from Slavization and Hellenization. They believe that without Ottoman help, they would have been absorbed by the Orthodox Church. Now let's look at the Hungarian perspective. Like the Croatians, most Hungarians view the Ottoman occupation as a disaster. However, opinions within Hungary differ. Even amid the devastation, some acknowledge the unexpected benefits that came from this dark era. For instance, 19th century romantics found certain positives in this period, and they expressed these views primarily as a protest against the Habsburgs. They focused on the rise of heroic frontier knights, the warriors of the 1,000-mile-long borderland, and argued that these struggles helped shape the Hungarian national character. The Romantic narrative used these battles to fuel 19th century anti-Habsburg resistance. After the Treaty of Trianon, when Hungary lost 72% of its territories, historians, like everyone else, were deeply affected by this traumatic partition of the country. Historians of the time emphasized the significance of the Transylvanian Principality during the Ottoman period because it provided cultural and religious refuge, playing a key role in the survival of the nation. As a positive outcome, some also pointed to the growth of Reformed Christianity that developed during the Ottoman Wars. Even in the face of darkness and oppression, they argued Hungary's resilience was forged. Modern scholarship offers a more nuanced perspective, highlighting how the Habsburg-ruled Kingdom of Hungary uniquely preserved its sovereignty after 1526. Unlike other Habsburg territories, Hungary maintained its constitution and legal identity during the Ottoman occupation. This political survival was remarkable and played a significant role in shaping later resistance movements. The historical debate is far from settled. Pro-Habsburg scholars acknowledge the occupation was catastrophic, but sharply criticize the semi-independence of the Transylvanian Principality. They call them traitors. The basic question still divides historians. Was alliance with Vienna the lesser evil? These burning questions have haunted us since the 19th century. What if the Hungarians had agreed to be absorbed by the Ottoman Empire? Could we have negotiated, preserving our identity under the Müsammaha? Yes, remember this term? Their blessed tolerance. Might we have avoided both the Habsburgs and the eventual loss of territory in Trianon? We will never know. But these questions are not just a relic of the past. They continue to surface in our debates today. As for contemporary Western European perspectives, they undoubtedly saw Hungary as the bastion of Christendom. They were very well informed about the events of the Ottoman Wars, and we know how much help they provided and how much they failed to provide. Just recall the words of General Lazarus Shandy, who lived between 1522 and 1583. He was the chief captain of Košice-Kassau, in the Kingdom of Hungary. He was the general of Emperor Maximilian II. Shandy witnessed the Ottoman peril firsthand. He wrote, "If we lost Hungary, all the weight of our defense and struggle for freedom would fall on our German peasants. However, I haven't said much about how modern Western views interpret the Ottoman Wars. So tell me, please, what did your textbooks say? Do they still describe Hungary as the bastion of Europe, or do they hardly mention it at all? Share your thoughts. We might feature them in a special follow-up episode. Send me your answers through social media, email, or Substack comments. In our next episode, we will explore the full timeline of the Ottoman Wars, from their first clashes in Europe in the 14th century to their final retreat in the 18th century. 4 centuries of war, rebellion, and resistance, all condensed into one sweeping narrative. Join me by subscribing wherever you prefer, on Spotify for basic access, on Patreon or Substack for full subscriber benefits, or even on Buy Me a Cafe for direct support. A quick note: while episodes will be available on Spotify, the complete series can be found on Substack. It is the only platform where I can build this community properly. Your support there helps keep independent history alive. Without you, these stories risk being forgotten. Help me preserve them. Remember, history doesn't belong to those who lived it, but to those who preserve it. This is Szántai Gábor, and you have been listening to the Hungarian History Podcast, the only English voice telling our nation's story. Until next time, sziasztok, a viszonthallásra!